Welcome back to today's exploration of the top creepy places in Canada, where the line between history and the supernatural is as thin as a whisper in a darkened hallway. Tonight, I'm taking you on a cross-country journey to 5 of Canada's most haunted locations. These aren't just places with a spooky reputation. They're sites where tragedy, mystery, and the unexplained have left a mark that lingers long after the lights go out. Before we begin, make sure to hit subscribe and drop a like if you love exploring the shadows with me. And if you've got your own ghost story or a favorite haunted location, share it in the comments below. Your story might just inspire a future episode. Now let's step into the unknown together. Number 5. Diefenbunker, Carp, Ontario. Located deep in the quiet fields of Carp, Ontario, there's a place that was never meant to see the light of day. The Diefenbunker, Canada's Cold War relic, was built in utter secrecy between 1959 and 1961, a 4-story fortress buried 75 feet underground. Its mission, to ensure the country's leaders could survive nuclear annihilation, even if the world above was reduced to ash. But what happens to a place designed for fear and survival, once the threat fades and the doors are left to rust? The Diefenbunker is now a museum, but its atmosphere is anything but welcoming. As you descend the long, echoing stairwell, you're swallowed by a heavy, dense silence. The air is thick, stale, and cold, untouched by sunlight for decades. Visitors tell stories of strange sensations, a sudden drop in temperature, a pressure in the chest, the feeling that someone is following just a few steps behind. Security guards on night patrol have reported hearing distant footsteps, doors slamming in empty corridors, and voices murmuring just out of earshot. Some even claim to have seen fleeting shadows dart across the walls, shapes that vanish the moment you turn your head. Many believe the bunker's oppressive energy is a residue of the anxiety and dread that once filled its halls. Imagine the psychological weight of preparing for the end of the world, knowing you might never see the sky again. Did those fears leave something behind? Something that lingers in the concrete and steel? And then there's the isolation. The Diefenbunker was meant to keep people safe, but it also meant cutting them off from everything they loved. Some say it's not ghosts of the dead that haunt these halls, but the restless spirits of those who prepared for a future that, thankfully, never came. Would you spend a night here, deep beneath the earth, surrounded by the echoes of Cold War paranoia? Or is the real terror the thought of being completely alone, with only your fears for company? Number 4. St. Francis Xavier University, Antigonish, Nova Scotia. St. Francis Xavier University isn't just one of Atlantic Canada's oldest and most respected institutions. It's a living archive of nearly 2 centuries of triumph, tragedy, and rumor. Founded in 1853, the university has grown from a humble Catholic college into a sprawling campus of stone and brick, its buildings layered with the ambitions and anxieties of generations. But beneath the academic prestige, the campus is steeped in stories that refuse to die. The architecture itself, Gilmora Hall's Gothic arches, the labyrinthine corridors of Mount St. Bernard, formerly a women's residence and hospital. Each structure has weathered storms, fires, and the constant churn of young lives seeking meaning. The most persistent legends swirl around the Blue Nun. Some say she was a member of the Sisters of St. Martha, part of the order that cared for students and the sick when the campus doubled as a hospital during outbreaks of influenza and tuberculosis. Her devotion was said to be absolute, her compassion boundless, but her end, according to whispers, was marked by sorrow and isolation. Now, her glowing blue habit is seen drifting through dorms and down moonlit corridors, especially in Mount St. Bernard, or during exam season. Students report waking to find her standing at the foot of their beds, her presence accompanied by an icy chill and an overwhelming sense of sadness. Her appearances peak during times of stress, exams, illness, or after a tragedy on campus. Some believe she's a guardian, watching over those in need. Others feel she's unable to move on, weighed down by sorrow or unfinished business. The Red Priest is her spectral counterpart, his presence felt during late-night prayer in the chapel and older lecture halls. Some say he was a priest or professor who lost his faith after a personal tragedy, doomed to wander the campus in search of redemption. Sightings are rare, but those who claim to have seen him describe a fleeting figure in crimson robes, accompanied by a sudden heaviness in the air, a sense of dread, and the feeling that he's searching for something, or someone he lost long ago. But the hauntings aren't limited to these two. Over the years, there have been reports of shadowy figures in the library after hours, lights flickering in empty classrooms, and the sound of unseen hands tapping on windows during Nova Scotia's long, stormy nights. Some say the very land, once Micmac territory, later a site of colonial expansion and conflict, carries its own restless energy. Every year, freshmen are warned about the Blue Nun and the Red Priest during orientation. Some students leave offerings, flowers, notes, even exam prayers, hoping for protection or luck. Others organize unofficial ghost tours, sharing stories passed down from upperclassmen. Even the most skeptical admit that, on certain nights, the campus feels different, as if the something is watching or waiting. For all its academic achievements, St. Francis Xavier University is a place where the past and present are never fully separated. Every student who passes through its halls adds another layer to its living history. Would you walk these ancient corridors alone, knowing that every shadow might hold the memory of someone who never left? Number 3. Plains of Abraham, Quebec City, Quebec. The Plains of Abraham in Quebec City may look peaceful now, a vast green expanse where locals picnic and tourists stroll. But beneath the gentle sway of grass is a battlefield that changed the fate of a continent. On a cold morning in September 1759, British and French forces clashed here in a brutal confrontation that lasted less than an hour, yet left a scar that would never truly heal. As dawn broke, British troops under General James Wolfe scaled the cliffs, catching the French defenders, led by Marquis de Montcalm, off guard. In the chaos that followed, musket fire and cries of pain echoed across the plain. By the time the smoke cleared, over 200 men lay dead, and both commanding generals would soon succumb to their wounds. The British victory marked the end of New France, but the cost was steep. The land became a mass grave, the trauma of that day seeping into the soil. It's said that the echoes of that violence have never faded. For centuries, people have whispered about ghostly soldiers appearing in the early morning mist or just after sunset. Some have seen figures in 18th century uniforms marching in formation, their faces pale, eyes fixed on a point no living person can see. Others wander alone, drifting through the fog as if searching for something lost in the chaos of battle. On certain nights, the unmistakable beat of drums and distant musket fire can be heard when the park is empty, long after reenactors have gone home. Sudden chills sweep across the field, patches of fog roll in from nowhere, and voices, sometimes in French, sometimes in English, carry on the wind, whispering prayers, orders, or final words. The Martello Towers, squat stone fortresses built in the 19th century, are said to be especially active. Shadowy figures have been spotted at the windows, and the sound of boots on the spiral stairs sometimes echoes when no one is inside. The Wolfe Montcalm Monument, standing as a silent witness to the carnage, draws people with an inexplicable sense of sadness and unease, especially on the anniversary of the battle. The sunken road, a forgotten depression along the old battlefield, has its own reputation. Many who walk there alone feel invisible footsteps trailing just behind them, or the cold brush of a hand on their shoulder. Even today, the Plains of Abraham remain a place of remembrance and reckoning. Every year, ghost tours and historical reenactments bring crowds to the fields, but when the sun sets and the city quiets, the stories linger. Some believe the soldiers who died here cannot rest, their duty unfinished, their stories left untold. Others say the land itself remembers, replaying the trauma for those sensitive enough to feel it. Would you walk these fields alone at dusk, knowing every step might stir the memories, and perhaps the spirits, of those who fell here centuries ago? Or would you leave before the last light fades, unwilling to risk meeting the ghosts of history face to face? Number 2. Tranquille Sanatorium, Kamloops, British Columbia. Tranquille Sanatorium sits on the outskirts of Kamloops, British Columbia, its red brick buildings slowly crumbling beneath the weight of a century's worth of secrets. Today, the site is surrounded by farmland and silence, but it wasn't always this way. In 1907, Tranquille opened its doors as a tuberculosis hospital, a last hope for the afflicted and a place where many would draw their final breath. Over the decades, the facility expanded, adding wards, tunnels, and eventually a mental institution as tuberculosis waned and new needs arose. By the time it closed in 1983, the sanatorium had witnessed thousands of deaths, each one leaving an invisible mark on its walls. Walking the grounds, you can still feel the heaviness in the air. The tunnels that snake beneath the buildings, once used to transport supplies, patients, and even the dead, are now choked with dust and darkness. Locals whisper that these tunnels are the heart of the haunting, a place where shadows flicker just out of sight and cold spots linger no matter the season. Some say they've heard the echo of footsteps behind them, or the soft murmur of voices in rooms that should be empty. The patient wards are equally unsettling. Broken windows let in shafts of pale light, illuminating peeling paint and rusted beds. Investigators and thrill-seekers who've spent the night report hearing the rattling of old gurneys, doors creaking open on their own, and the unmistakable sensation of being watched. More than one person has fled the property, convinced they were not alone. But it's not just the physical decay that chills visitors, it's the stories. Nurses who worked at Tranquille spoke of patients who would talk to unseen visitors, or who claimed to see figures standing at the foot of their beds in the dead of night. Some staff members reported hearing their names whispered when no one else was around, or seeing the shadowy outlines of children darting across the hallways, only to find the wards empty. After its closure, the site was briefly used as a youth detention center, adding another layer of pain and unrest to its history. Since then, Tranquille has become a magnet for ghost hunters and filmmakers. Movies like The A-Team and Firewall have used its eerie backdrop, but no director has captured the true sense of unease that settles in as night falls. The most persistent legend is that of the tunnel children, apparitions of young patients, forever lost in the labyrinth below. People claim to hear laughter echoing through the darkness, or to glimpse small, pale faces peering from the shadows. Others have described a suffocating sense of despair in the old isolation rooms, or the feeling of icy hands brushing their arms as they pass through the doorways. Is it the memory of so much suffering that lingers here, or something older and more mysterious? Some believe the land itself is cursed, that long before the first brick was laid, this was a place where the boundary between the living and the dead was thin. Others say it's simply the weight of grief and hope, layered over a century that refuses to let go. Would you spend a night in the tunnels beneath Tranquille Sanatorium, listening for voices that aren't your own? Or would you keep your distance, content to let the past rest in darkness? You've heard the ghost stories, you've seen the horror movies, but these places, they're real. From ghost-infested hotels to roads no GPS wants to follow, carefully researched, creepy as hell. And yes, you can actually visit them. If you're that kind of curious, this is your guide. The top 25 most creepy US destinations pulls back the curtain on the darkest corners of America. Order your copy today. Number 1. Banff Springs Hotel, Alberta. Standing like a stone sentinel among the peaks of the Canadian Rockies, the Banff Springs Hotel is more than just a luxury retreat. It's a castle with a shadowy past, its grand halls echoing with stories that refuse to die. Opened in 1888 by the Canadian Pacific Railway, the hotel was meant to lure travelers west with a promise of elegance and adventure. But from the very beginning, the Banff Springs seemed destined to collect secrets, tragedies, and restless souls. The architecture alone invites legend. Turrets and towers pierce the mountain mist, while endless corridors twist and turn, creating a labyrinth that feels as if it was designed to confuse not just guests, but spirits as well. Over the decades, the hotel has expanded, burned, been rebuilt, and renovated, each change adding new layers to its haunted reputation. The most famous ghost to wander these halls is the bride, a young woman whose wedding day ended in disaster. The story goes that, as she descended the hotel's grand marble staircase, her dress brushed against a candle's flame. Panicked, she tripped, fell, and died at the foot of the stairs, her dreams extinguished in an instant. Since then, countless guests and staff have reported seeing her, sometimes drifting down the staircase in a billowing white gown, her face shrouded by a veil, other times dancing alone in the ballroom, forever waiting for a celebration that will never come. But the bride is far from alone. Room 873, once a family suite, is sealed behind a wall on the 8th floor. The legend says a man murdered his wife and daughter there before taking his own life, and that the room became so haunted, bloody handprints reappearing on the mirrors, terrified guests fleeing into the hall, that the hotel simply closed it off. Even now, visitors in nearby rooms report hearing desperate cries, muffled voices, and the feeling of icy fingers brushing against their skin. And then there's Sam the bellman, a real staff member who worked at the hotel for decades and loved it so much, he never really left. Guests have described a kindly old man in a 1960s bellhop uniform helping them with their bags, unlocking doors, or giving directions, only for him to vanish before their eyes. Staff have found elevators called to floors with no one inside, and lights switched on in empty rooms. Sam's presence is said to be comforting, a reminder that not all ghosts are here to frighten. Other stories linger in the hotel's shadowy corners. Some speak of a headless bagpiper wandering the grounds, searching for his lost instrument. Others tell of phantom parties in empty banquet halls, or a spectral bartender who appears to warn guests when they've had a little too much to drink. The hotel's archives are filled with letters and guestbook entries describing unexplained footsteps, flickering lights, and the overwhelming sense that after dark, the Banff Springs becomes a world apart, one where the past and present mingle freely. Whether you believe in ghosts or not, a night at the Banff Springs Hotel is an experience you won't soon forget. The walls seem to breathe with memory, the air tinged with the perfume of old stories and unfinished business. Would you dare to spend the night in a room with a sealed door just down the hall? Would you descend the grand staircase alone, knowing the bride might be waiting at the bottom? Or would you raise a glass in the lounge, hoping for one last encounter with Sam the bellman before the lights go out? In this castle among the clouds, every shadow has a story. Canada, a land of sweeping forests, ancient mountains, and vibrant cities, stretches from rugged Pacific shores to the wild Atlantic coast. Its history is rich with resilience, diversity, and wonder, woven with mysteries that linger in quiet towns, forgotten roads, and the vast spaces in between. Every province holds stories, both celebrated and secret, waiting for those willing to seek them out. Thank you for joining me on this exploration of Canada's creepiest and most mysterious locations. If you enjoyed the journey, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your own haunted tales in the comments below. Until next time, stay curious and stay creepy. Bye for now.